and welcome back to my channel. We're doing a special Mohe with Jenny Park episode for the month of May, celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And so for every episode this month, I'll be sitting down with a different Asian leader to talk about their passion for their career, how they got there, how they're embracing their Asian American identity. And I'm so excited because there's just a bunch of really creative people in creative leadership positions, from being comms leaders to working on some incredible brands to being authors and professors and makeup artists, all these types of things that I didn't see growing up. So I'm really excited to get to sit down and chat with them for this month. For today's episode, I'm sitting down with Julie Inouye, who is the VP of Comms and Social at everyone's favorite photo filter brand, VSCO. And she has just had a phenomenal career working on some of the most incredible brands, from PlayStation and Yahoo to LinkedIn, where we met. And I think more personally, I've just gotten to watch Julie just be someone who's been generous to me in giving me so much advice and mentorship. So I'm excited for us to all chat and learn more about her today. Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
I wanted to share actually my first impression of you, because I don't think I've ever said this. Well, one is I distinctly remember you had the coolest looks in the office, like the best office. So I also want to talk about how awesome cool you look at home right now. Can you tell me what you're wearing?
Oh my gosh. As you know, Jenny, I love small shops, especially small shops that are owned by women. This is a brand actually called New Works, and I found them on Instagram, and it's a San Francisco-based woman-owned business. And the print is actually by a woman, a Black artist. Her name's Studio Mucci on Instagram. So I try to, support the people.
I feel like there was one time when there was one outfit that included pink tulle. Am I right?
Yes, I love tulle. I think adults all should wear tulle. I was dressing my girls a lot on the weekends, and it's part of the story of how I got to VSCO. But they were dressing up, and we were taking lots of photos on the weekend, and I just fell in love with just the tulle and the colors. And I was like, why? Clearly, I love it. Why should I hold myself back? And I started wearing it into the office. And I think once you get over that initial shock of doing it, people just expect.
That was one impression. The other impression was, I think I had maybe met you a couple times, and you were so generous with giving me advice about different decisions I had to make. And it was my first holiday in the Bay Area, and you knew that I didn't have family in town. And you texted me and you were like, hey, Jenny, if you're missing yelling Asian parents and want real Korean food, do you guys want to come over for the holidays? And I thought that was literally the most generous and kind thing.
No, it's funny that you bring that up, because I always feel like a natural kinship for folks that have grown up in Korean immigrant families. And more importantly, I've lived alone in a city where you don't have ties. And I know how it feels when you celebrate milestones and things like that, and you don't have your family nearby. You always struck me as someone who loved being around other people and family and stuff. So I wanted to make sure you were okay.
I appreciate that. I wanted to start from just the beginning, just to even think of when you were growing up. What did you want to be when you were younger, and what did your parents want you to be?
Well, I'll start with what my parents wanted to be, and it's probably not going to be too unique for sort of immigrant parents. And I should specify Korean immigrant parents. There were only really two tracks: lawyer, doctor. 20 years ago, those were the only paths. And I think maybe the third one was, being a TV anchor. I think that was when my grandfather really you need to be like Connie Chung one day. I want to see you on TV. So those were sort of the three paths. And what I really wanted to be was a fourth grade elementary school teacher. That is what I aspired to go do. Ultimately, when I started college, I thought maybe that's what I would do. And I think it was just this concept of learning and community and creating environments where people felt safe to grow. So I just always thought that would be my path, which much to the chagrin of my parents, of course.
Do you remember what your first paying job was?
I was a fragrance girl at Macy's in high school, and I loved it because, again, it was allowed me to meet with lots of different people and help them do something that could feel really, I think, intimidating for folks to come and find, a fragrance. But yes. And then that turned into wrapping gifts over the holiday. And then that turned into actually like selling clothes and doing fun stuff.
Did you ever watch Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
I did.
I don't think she might have been a lipstick counter, but I picture that vibe where she's just like taking the whole floor by storm and like selling every which way.
No, that's actually what I started doing when I was at the Nordstrom. I worked at this department. I don't even think they have it anymore. It's called collector's department, where you would literally bring, you'd lay out the whole season of like clothes, shoes. Like we would do ensemble styling. Basically, I think it was like a styling area. And I think it's done differently today, but yeah, it was so much fun making people just, feel good head to toe.
That's awesome. And we were just talking about that you went to UCSD. So that's where you went to, is that where you did undergrad?
Yes.
Okay. What did you study and how did you get to your first job then?
My grandfather, I think, did know that I loved, being around people and sort of telling stories. And so I thought, like, if I at least got into communications, I could sort of explore and entertain. Maybe media, maybe TV could be, or production or something like that could be an area I would go into. And at the time, not a lot of colleges had programs that were really like fine-tuned around marketing, comms. Like it was just broad sweep communications and journalism. So that was sort of the bucket that I studied. And then I did a few internships in PR specifically, and I got hooked. And so I'm one of those rare birds. I always tell people I actually studied communications and found a path in communications and have stayed for 20 years in communications. And I really, really love it. Like I can't see myself doing something else.
What was it about it that immediately attracted you?
It's funny. These questions are so funny because when you are starting out your career, you have a hypothesis, but you have such more clarity looking back after 20 years, like what it is. And I think what it boils down to is that I always believe my natural superpower, people ask you all the time, what's your superpower? It's connecting people and people to information, stories, and other people like them. And I think the thing that's really unique about the role communications folks play within organizations or any sort of environment is that they're connecting people to other things, right? So it's like access to an opportunity, it's access to another human that has information, or to the, information itself. And you're playing that like central hub role in a way. And at every company I've been, I've been able to sort of be involved at the center of all these things that are going on and connect dots in another way, like at a big company, connecting what the right hand and left hand are doing. And I find so much joy in doing that, which sounds so simple, but I think it takes a lot of nuance. It takes EQ skills. It takes analytical skills. So that kind of is, I think, what keeps me going. So
you went to CNN right out of school. What was your first job there?
So that's the craziest story that I have probably throughout my career. My first day, actually, I was waiting to meet my manager. It was like a new hire orientation. I was like an intern. I show up, I'm waiting in the lobby, and CNN, they've got screens everywhere. And the first plane in New York had hit the towers. And I literally saw the second tower hit live on screen. And I just remember at that time, no one knew that it was a terrorist attack. Like it felt like some freak accident. You literally, if you can imagine, like as things are going on, people are trying to piece all this stuff together. And then within, minutes, you see just scrambling all around you. And
wait, this is your first day?
My first day was September 11th.
Oh my gosh.
And, I'm like, totally naive, new grad student coming out of college. Like it's first time I've lived outside of the Bay Area, away from my family. I luckily went with some friends from college. So I had an apartment with some friends that I knew. Anyway, so I'm waiting for my manager to come pick me up. And literally it's just everyone's frantic because we don't know what's going on. And I was trying to be helpful even in that crisis situation, which again tells you a lot about my personality. They're like, my manager's like, oh, go manage the press hotline if you can, because they were trying to triage what was going on. Wow. And I was just answering the press hotline. And one of the first calls I picked up, a gentleman called in and it was really frantic. It's like, the Pentagon's been hit. And then they hung up. And literally seconds later on the screens in the PR department area, you see the fire coming out of the Pentagon. And so at that point, literally it went from 0 to 100. Like everyone was trying to get everyone to safety. And so my manager was like, how can I take you to my home, or do you have a place you can go? And, you just kind of go into like, what's the word where you just freeze up a little bit and everything's slow-mo. I remember the smell in the air. I remember walking out of the building. I remember trying to get to the subway so that I could get home. And it's all very slow-mo. It was jammed up. The streets were packed with people walking or trying to get home. Like it's eerie kind of now thinking about that feeling and how when you get, when something like that happens. Anyway, long story short, I finally get to my place. We spend a week at home just watching the news. And then we went with a bunch of, like I said, friends from college. Some of them opted to go home. They were like, I don't want to stay in DC. I don't feel safe. And in that moment, I called my parents and I said, I'm going to extend my time here because I just know that I'm going to learn so much being here right now as this is going on. And so that is the start of my career. I got hooked in a weird way. I'm like one of those folks that sort of go towards the fire instead of away from the fire. Like I felt there was an opportunity to learn, and I hunkered down and I stayed there a little bit longer than I had planned. And for me, it cemented sort of what I love about communications. Like I said, like clear communication on what was going on, helping people tell the stories.
How long were you at CNN before you went to Yahoo then next?
No. So it was an internship. It was only supposed to be like, I think, 10 weeks long. I ended up staying through the end of the year. I stayed right before Christmas. And then I came back home, and it was, the tech bust. It's 2002 at that time. So it was like massive tech bust. Like nobody was hiring entry levels. I was, just thrilled to even get another internship that paid. And so I went in, I think, at a PR agency that was looking for a paid internship role. And in that interview, the woman, her name was Amber Ranson. I just remember this conversation so vividly. She's like, "Are you looking for a full-time job?" And I was like, "Yes, I am actually. I'd prefer full-time, an assistant account executive role, not an internship. I've done many internships, And she's like, "Hold, please." She walks out, comes back in, and is like, "We'd like to just offer you a full-time job." And I just, again, just goes to show you gotta always go in and have the conversation, because you don't know what paths will be available. So that started my agency career, I guess. Like I stayed at Porter Novelli for, I want to say 5 years or so.
Wow.
But in the back of my head, I still really wanted to go back to DC somehow, because I was hooked, as you know, like just being there in DC and sort of seeing the movement that was going on in the political sphere, and just the concept of government relations really interested me. And then I went to DC and I started at a different agency called APCO Worldwide, which is another PR agency, more strategic comms, I guess. And so I got to work on some projects that exposed me more to some of the government relations type of work. But end all be all, I am a California girl. What I realized after like 8 months of it, like I was there for a hot minute, and I realized like, I actually can make more impact, because I wanted to change the world ultimately. I was like, I want to turn on the world. And so I thought DC was the only place you could sort of do that. In my head, I don't know why that was wired. And I think it's probably because of the experience I had at CNN too, just knowing that big decisions being made in this small little city. But I really quickly realized that I could still make an impact and do it in a way probably more quickly, working for a technology platform that touched millions of people in a really intimate way, right? Like you are entering people's lives and their homes. And so that's sort of grounded me in, okay, every decision you make, I feel like if you don't know where you're headed, it's just fine tuning where you're going. So I always tell people that too. Like, even if you don't know the answer, knowing what you're not going to do is also still a step forward. And so I just kept using that as like my way to figure out ultimately where my home was. And so, yeah, I came back, and I luckily was able to come back to Porter Novelli. I stayed there, worked on a few different accounts, and then was offered an opportunity to come in-house at Yahoo, and then I haven't looked back. So that was my journey to Yahoo.
What was your role at Yahoo? What did you do?
I was a corporate communications manager, and my role there was to help with internal and external. And I also, again, like have such vivid memories of just the day there and the way the office is set up, and like how comms work functions in a a big sort of consumer tech company. And, I was the one who helped like every earnings, like pull. I mean, I remember this story so vividly. It's actually a woman, her name is Helena Mouse. She was, ran some of our corporate comms earnings cycles then. And I was the one responsible for printing up, these boards with all the key sort of questions for earnings calls. And of course the font came out wrong. And, I was like bawling in the middle of the hallway because the font was, not the right size. And, I remember Helena just calming me down and saying, it's going to be okay. And yeah, it's going to be okay. I mean, that's the other thing about comms that people just need to remember. It's not ER, it's PR. We will be okay. But it didn't feel that way in that moment.
I bet in the moment it feels like the world is ending.
I don't think that is no longer the case of how the is done anymore. But so I got exposed to. I mean, that was my first real opportunity to get exposed to corporate comms. So crisis, earnings, financial, investor relations, like things like that. That I, at an agency, you're just not as involved in or have the experience or opportunity really. My agency experience was more on product launches and sort of things like that, thought leadership.
You mentioned wanting to make impact and change the world. Where do you think that came from?
I've always felt like you've got one life to live, let it not be vanilla, like add a color is always. That's how I've always felt. Like even as a young child, I was like, I don't want to be vanilla. I don't want to be a blank canvas. I want to add my print on the world, whatever. And so I've always sort of felt that way. And we all have something to contribute. And so, so the past 20 years has been figuring out what those colors are that I'm adding to the blank canvas that is around me.
I really like that. And the moment you said that, don't be vanilla and add colors, that feels like that actually really does. Like, I think that's so true of you.
Oh,
that's so cool.
Yeah, no, I really believe it. I mean, we all have something to offer. So, why waste that one life you have?
Do you think that's something your parents also encouraged as you were growing up?
Well, this is like the fun part. I think they're massively proud of where I'm at today and what I've become. I think, it's yes, do all those things, but be yamjone, which is, be calm and don't cause a ruckus, because I'm very outgoing and loud and I speak up. And I've just, in my entire life, I've been conditioned and sort of taught not to talk back, not to speak up. You're told all these things. So even as I was growing up, I always felt like, yes, I'm doing new things no one else has done in my family. I honestly don't know that they knew what to do with me, to be honest, because I was constantly like stretching what they thought should be the archetype of an Asian woman. My dad's a very strict, traditional Korean father. I had a curfew at 10 o'clock in high school, but I did as much as I could within the
You're like pushing the boundaries.
My parents wanted me to focus on school and high school. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I got good grades, but I did 10 other things. I was part of all these community clubs. I ran for student body president. Like, I just always felt like I could do more.
I could totally relate with that. When you said yamjane, it's funny because my parents used to always jokingly yell at me that my laugh was not very yamjane.
Oh my gosh, I heard that too.
That it's like too loud or too boisterous, or like my whole body reacts to it. And girls need to laugh in a very much more like
shy way, yes.
Yeah, like a yamjane way.
Yeah, no, I've been told that all the time, like because my laugh is very loud too. And, my dad would always go like,
Okay, so you were at Yahoo doing corporate comms, which is different than consumer comms, which is, I think, a helpful distinction. And I had no idea until I came to LinkedIn too what corp comms was. How long were you at Yahoo for, and then where did you go to next?
I think it was I didn't stay for too long. It was like probably around 2 years or so. I stayed at Yahoo, and then I left to join PlayStation because I wanted to.
Were you a gamer?
Well, so no, I wasn't. But here's the thing, like, here's what back to that analogy of like, even if you don't know where you're going, not knowing what isn't, like, constantly I was like, what makes me a little bit uncomfortable? I'm going to go try it. And gaming, I knew, it was fast paced, global brand, much more event focused, sort of building rabid love from a community of hardcore. Like, I wanted to learn that aspect. And so, I joined PlayStation not knowing how to pick up a controller. Like, I don't know. You could like talk over me, but by the time I left, I could talk, HD, all this stuff with everyone. And it's actually how I met my husband.
Oh my gosh!
I met him when I started working at PlayStation, and I always tell people he dated me because I could get him free games. So, and I could talk, the talk with him about all the new titles that were coming out.
Wait, I do want to set the scene. What were some of the games that were coming out, just to set what?
When this was? Oh gosh, it was Little Big World. I'm PS3 time was when I was there. The console, it had just come out. PS3.
PS3. Okay. I'm not a gamer, so I actually don't know why I asked. I wouldn't know what to do with this.
No, I'm trying to remember now. Assassin's Creed was one of the big titles. I mean, now it's literally like, I'm like, wiping cobwebs right now from my brain to try to remember all these titles. But, it was PS Move was also in. It was trying to take advantage of getting people to move. And so there was a lot more like athleticism.
Like Wii.
Yes, like there was some AR innovation going on at the time. But what was fun for me in that job was PlayStation was trying to go over the set-top box at that time. And so for me, it felt like an emerging tech move. If you think about now, like HBO, everyone is now direct to consumer. Everyone has like gone over the set-top box and have found like direct ways to reach their end consumer. And like, how do you own the living room was sort of the strategic play. And for me, that was super exciting that I could be part of a brand trying to make that big bet happen. And then I did 3 E3s. It's the big event every year, and massive, massive undertaking. If you're in the gaming world, it's a big deal. I had done 3 of those, and I was like, okay, I think I'm done. Like I need a new challenge. And I know how to do this now.
Then after PlayStation, is that when you went to LinkedIn?
I did.
Okay.
It's funny to me now saying this story because everyone knows what LinkedIn is, but you have to put yourself back like, 10 plus years ago. No one knew what it was. Like when I told my parents I was going to a company called LinkedIn, they were like the car maker. Like they were so confused, like Lincoln the car and not LinkedIn.
Oh, no way.
It wasn't as well known in a brand name as it is today. And so
what compelled you to go and take this risk?
Wildly different from what I've done. Again, like it was something that was a new challenge. I could learn something completely different. Social media and this concept of networking and media, social media platforms was something that, again, was nascent, I dare say. Facebook was around, but it wasn't what it was today. And so just, again, giving myself the opportunity to explore, learn sort of a totally different space was attractive to me.
For me, and I think a lot of people my age, we have conversations about like, how do you know when there's still like runway for you in the current role or company you are versus like trying something new? How do you think you knew when you're ready for the next chapter? Or like, what advice would you give to people of knowing when it's the right time to explore something new?
You get to a point where you sort of feel like you have all the answers. There's not much coming across your desk where you sort of don't know exactly how to get to the resolution. And really, it's about helping your team learn how to do it. I know at that point it's the beginning of like transition for me. When that moment hits and I get those signals, it's okay. Like, what is next for me? When am I going to start to feel super sweaty palms and like I need to figure something out that's new? And if I'm not having those feelings, I know I'm getting a little complacent and it's getting too comfortable. So, yeah.
Do you ever get in the back of your mind ever think like, will I regret this?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think leaving a big company, a stable job, like a wonderful brand like LinkedIn, I've had many of those. It's like, am I doing the right thing? But I haven't looked back. Like, you have to trust your gut. And I left for a very specific reason, which was to learn how to build again and run the ship. And I left wanting a very, again, like specific sort of range of things I wanted to learn. And I'm learning that right now. So I haven't looked back, but yeah, was it hard to get to that point where you're ultimately taking that step? Of course it is. You're leaving something that is, by all accounts, a wonderful job, and a wonderful career with wonderful people like yourself, like it was really hard to leave.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's cool to hear. How did you know what you wanted your next, like, maybe not your next job, but like your job in a few years? It sounds like you knew, and were you pretty vocal about, like, this is the experience you want to gain and where you want to go next, so people could help advocate that?
Not always. I think it's something that I've honed more later in my career, because I found the word, again, back to the analogy of like, I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I knew what I didn't want to do. As you, I think, progress, at least for me, I was able to better articulate the destination. So something like this, where I can learn how to do these skills. And so my guidance and advice to people always is, don't get hung up on the title or the job. Focus on, like, and by the way, call it, if you know, like, I want to be a head of comms someday. If you know with passion that's what you want to be, definitely say it out loud. But if you don't yet know, speak to the things skill sets that you want to learn. Like, I see X, Y, and Z leader doing this. I want to learn how to do that, and being able to articulate that, I think, is massively helpful for folks around you. And I don't think people should be shy about asking for help to get exposure to that, because that's also part of, no one is going to speak up for you the way you are for your own career.
That's cool. So after LinkedIn, you went to VSCO. Can you talk a little bit about that again, and like along the same lines of a new experience and something you were attracted to trying?
Yeah, no, again, it was one of those, I knew I loved community, back to the kind of superpower comment, like a connection. Like, all these jobs that I've taken, actually, if you look back, they are at the core of all of them. They're based on community, building community. And I love doing that. And what excited me, but also scared me, was that I had no background working with creators. I don't work with young Gen Z. Like, it was just super exciting for me that I could take on something that was wildly different from what I was doing at LinkedIn. Yeah, and that's exactly what I've been doing. I've been learning an entire new demographic, new culture, just new way of, even the playbooks that worked before are not going to work. I think also has been like wonderful to sort of learn, especially in this current macro like environment, where with the pandemic and also the social justice issues, like, it has been really invigorating knowing that I have to not just use the things that I know how to do it, but you have to be curious and try.
So we talked about like Yamjone and how that was something within our families that was mentioned. As you were navigating just like your career, were there any other like maybe Asian stereotypes or assumptions that you felt like someone had placed on you, or you found yourself like molding into at one point in your career, and how did you navigate that?
It's a really good question. I think it's probably an extension of this comment that we've already just brought up around being Yamjone. I mean, it's literally, I've heard that so many times, and like, not looking at people in the eye. I don't know if your parents did that too, but if I was angry or I was upset or I had something to say, I'd look directly at my parents and be like, why are you looking directly at me? Look down. I just remember I had to do so much work to unwind those things, working in tech and working at a place where you're working with lots of people who have very strong opinions. That took a lot of conscious effort on my part to kind of get over speaking up when I know something with conviction is wrong, or I have to speak up for my team, or something, you're taking the brand in the wrong way and you have to speak up. It's something that I just, like I said, it's years and years of internalizing what you've been taught. Lots of folks, I've heard phrases like this even in my own reviews, like, Julie's a pair of steady hands. Massive compliment, don't get me wrong, but I think it's also woven in with she's not going to cause a ruckus, or she's not going to cause trouble.
Interesting.
So I still take it as a massive compliment, but I'm very much like aware that there is that stigma that, I'm an Asian leader, a senior leader within the org. I'm a steady pair of hands. But that has made me even more, like I said, with conviction to speak up it has spurred me on to actually not just be a steady pair of hands, but someone who is doing it for the right reasons and speaking up when it's necessary.
You know, this year, and I know like racism against Asian American communities is not new, but it was certainly exacerbated over the last few months. And I've seen you, and I've been really inspired by the way that you've also spoken out, and like as someone who is a leader on LinkedIn, even especially like the way that you've been like using your platform to speak out and whatnot. How has that been like for you for speaking out, not only on behalf of others, but for your own community?
I mean, I should be thanking you, first of all, because I think you posted something first and I was just like, my goodness, I can't keep thinking that this is someone else's job, like someone else is going to do it. And it's bizarre because I'm so vocal about so many causes in general. I'm very loud about it. And yet when it came to our own community, like you shut down a little bit, and I was genuinely nervous to post my first sort of update. But what spurred it on, and I think I might have messaged you, but it really, I saw your piece and I was like, these wonderful people around me, you know, who I care deeply about are putting themselves out there and being brave. Like, if not me, then who else is also like, how can I expect others to do this if I'm not going to do it myself? So a massive thank you to you for inspiring me to take that action.
You know, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but when I first started LinkedIn, you and Connie were literally the first time I'd ever seen an Asian woman as a director or like a leader. And I think it was the first time that I thought like, oh, I could aspire to be something like that too. And I think it was like the moment it clicked of, wow, representation matters. Yeah. So I have thank you back to you. But I'm curious, like, did you feel like you had seen other Asian leaders like model the way for you as you were going through your career? And is that something that you have now, like, it's like something you're passionate about?
I don't see as many heads of comms or sort of VP level exec comms women who happen to be Asian. Not to say that they don't exist. I definitely feel like there are some, but they weren't like everywhere, especially when I was starting out my career. So it's sad because I don't feel like I had that when I was starting out in communications. But I had people around me. Like I had friends who were pushing sort of forward in their own respective ways, like in law or whatever it was. And so for me, that was what kind of egged me on and kept me going. And also, you know, having managers, allies that like really wanted to groom and grow me, which again, also I'm just really grateful for, because I think when you think about what's possible, you need people around you to do that.
For sure.
Not always is it going to come from you, right? Like you're going to want people to, and I mean, you mentioned Shannon earlier. Shannon was one of those folks who just constantly threw me at like, okay, Julie, try this now. I mean, and I will forever be grateful and indebted to her for pushing me to just try everything that I possibly could. Yeah. And she's not an Asian woman, but she clearly saw the potential and was helping me, you know, learn these new skills. So like, I didn't realize there were so many Asian CEOs and founders, and like, where have they been all my life? Like, where have these people been?
I don't know. Someone did a post of all of the brands and I had no idea.
That's my point. But it's awesome to me that we now know. So it's like, when you ask the question of like, who did you look up to? It's unfortunate because I haven't done it and others haven't done it, which is they haven't claimed it. And I think we're claiming it now, which then becomes easier for younger people. And I see it. I get pinged on LinkedIn all the time. I have at least 1 or 2 mentor calls with college students every month, like once a week at least. They'll ping me on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, let's talk about your career. And it's because I'm visible now. I've posted, and that people, it's like I've made it okay for them to reach out, and their messages are always very sweet. Like, you know, I've seen your posts, and American woman, I'm just, you know, and they're all like Asian descent that are pinging me, asking just how I've progressed through my career and made these decisions. And I've never spoken out, and like, I just feel bad that I haven't done it sooner.
That's so cool. Well, thank you, Julie, for taking the time to share your story. Like, I think for me personally, like I love hearing about your life, and I think other people to see an Asian woman and just like a woman in all these cool jobs, I think will be super fun to see. So thanks so much for taking the time.
So fun to talk about all of this with you, and thank you for hosting this conversation. I can't wait to see all your other guests.